Crystal, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to? Okay.
Mr. Altman,
Present.
Ms. Carr, Mr. Ehrlich,
Present.
Mr. Ferry,
Present.
Ms. Ferris,
Here.
Ms. Foster,
Here.
Ms. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Letton,
Good morning, here.
Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Present.
Ms. Cyber, I do see her online. We'll circle back. Mr. Swinson,
Here.
Mr. Teixeira,
Morning.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Here.
and Mr. Young.
Here.
Ms. Ferris, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Can you hear
Ms.
me,
Cyber?
Ms. Cyber, Ashley Cyber, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Can
Thank
folks
you.
hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. My mistake. We do have a quorum. Q.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Got lots of folks online today. Thanks for joining us. And now I'm going to go back to you, Tracy, for the remote meeting rules of the day, please.
For members of the public joining us today, to observe the meeting, visit trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, select Advisory Planning Commission meeting, hybrid meeting for today's date. There you'll find a link to the public webinar. To make a comment, raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen when the irrelevant agenda item comes up. If you've joined by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. For informational items, public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For action or possible action items, public comment will be taken before the commission takes any action. To remote APC members, please raise your hand to speak, mute your microphone unless you're speaking, and keep your camera on if you're able. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or have sidebar conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I'd like to just extend an opportunity to Mr. Altman. We have a new Placer County lay representative. Thanks for joining us, Brad, stepping up. Just give you an opportunity to say a couple words about yourself if you'd like.
Thanks, Brendan. My name is Brad Altman. I'm the principal engineer of Evolve Design Works in Tahoe City. We provide land use planning, architectural design, and civil and structural engineering. I've moved to Lake Tahoe in 1999 and have been doing engineering up here since about 2000 and work on a variety of projects. I've been working with TRPA for obviously a really long time and was asked to join this committee on behalf of Representative Gustafson. Thanks.
Great. Good to have you. I think your experience will be great. So let's move on to approval of our agenda. Any changes, John?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no changes.
Thank you very much. We'll approve the agenda approved as it was posted for the record, and I'll move us on to approval of our minutes. Item 3. We do have a draft set of minutes from our March 11, 2026 meeting. It's on page 5 of our packets. Any member of the commission have any comments on the minutes?
I wasn't here.
Okay. I don't see any hands raised. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
Thank you, Robert. Do we need a second on the minutes?
Second.
Thanks, Ellery. We got our second. Do we need a roll call on the minutes? I'm sorry, I forget.
No, it's fine. Just you can do a voice vote.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Yes, I will abstain as I was on the road for Tahoe.
Steve was on the road. Steve abstains.
And I'll abstain as I wasn't here.
Brad, thank you. Okay, I think we're good on the minutes. Let's get us into the meat of our agenda then. We're going to go to item 4, our planning matters. And item 4A is consideration and possible recommendation for adoption of proposed amendments to TRPA Code of Ordinances, Chapter 37 regarding additional building height and the definition of major arterial information on this item can be found on page 57 of the packet. And I'm going to turn this over to Julie Roll with TRPA to present. Hi, Julie.
Hi, everyone. Actually, before we get into kind of the meat of the proposed amendments, we have the applicant team here, and they're going to give just a little overview about the Tahoe Keys Marina redevelopment project. This is just for context, but it's related to the proposed amendments. So after they're done, they'll come back to me and I'll go through the amendments. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Feldman.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the APC. Lou Feldman on behalf of Suntex, the owner and redeveloper of the Tahoe Keys Marina. Also present is Eric Metz, the Vice President of Development for Suntex, and want to make a really special thanks to Julie Roll, who inherited this project midstream. And she didn't hit the ground running, she hit the ground sprinting. She has done an amazing job, and we're really pleased that we were able to maintain the schedule and are before you today with an introduction to the project. And again, this is just an overview. The project isn't before you, just the code amendments, as you know. Suntex, next slide, please, is a marina company. They have over 100 marinas in the United States, 50,000 slips between wet and dry, and it was refreshing to have that level of expertise participate in the reimagination of the Tahoe Keys Marina. And you'll see, next slide, please, that Suntex is a very willing partner in trying to advance our environmental and public access goals. The project will include, among other things, public restrooms for the trailhead for the Conservancy, EV boat chargers at all slips, enhanced non-motorized watercraft access, some EMS presence in the project and space provided to supply police and fire, and some mitigation strategies such as paid parking to reduce vehicle trips. Next slide, please. As you may or may not be aware, the 305 slips that were in a state of severe disrepair have now been replaced over the winter season, and a very significant AIS upgrade and the elimination of microplastics. The slips were in very bad shape, and we're happy to see that they were completed on schedule and are now functioning. Next slide, please. Those of you that have been out there are familiar with the existing condition. There's always been ponding, kind of a chaotic display of marina activity. Next slide, please. The view shed is not exactly pristine. There's even some construction projects that had been abandoned and were inherited. All of this is inherited by Suntex, and the purpose of the project, of course, is to remedy this. Next slide, please. In the overview, what is interesting is, as this project was originally conceived, the boat launch is at the right-hand side of the slide, competing for space with the pedestrian activity and parking for the retail and restaurants. I mean, in terms of land use planning, it gets an F. Next slide, please. So the reimagination of the marina has a fresh look at how circulation and operations should work, elevating the pedestrian experience and segregating cars from people. So the boat launch has been moved to, I don't know if Julie can highlight that, to the kind of middle portion of the slide next to the larger building, which would be conditioned boat storage and some water tanks. But all of the boating activity is in the left-hand portion of the slide, and then the retail, food and beverage, and support activities for concessions are on the right-hand side of the slide. So there's a much better organization of uses. Next slide, please. We are before you today because in order to realize the vision, we need a couple of minor height amendments. One is specific to the retail and food and beverage, which would allow us up to 38 feet of height, not additional stories, but it enables us to respond to, we can't do underground parking because we are on a constrained site. We have limited surface area for infiltration, and we have some design standards from the city of South Lake Tahoe, like the 5 and 12 roof pitch. So we're able to accommodate the parking, and I think you'll see some elevated architecture with a fairly modest bump in the height for 2-story buildings. We're not seeking to increase heights to 3 or 4 stories, which are common around the lake these days. Next slide, please. We also have before you I think more or less a cleanup amendment for Chapter 90, Venice Drive, which is described currently as Venice Boulevard, will be correctly identified in the code as Venice Drive, and Venice Drive East, which is in most respects a long driveway to the cul-de-sac dead end to the Tahoe Keys Marina and the Cove East Trailhead, is, if anything, not a major arterial as is currently described in the code. It is a local connector, and we of course support staff's recommendation on that correction as well. Next slide, please. This is just a brief walkthrough of the reimagined marina, and as you'll see, there's a promenade that pretty much circumnavigates the new improvements. This is the Dockmaster building. It's adjacent to where the new boat launch will be, and servicing of fueling, etc. By the way, the fueling upgrades are magnificent compared to the existing condition. Next slide, please. Here is the actual boat launch area, looking to the retail and concession, food and beverage, and some office space buildings on the second floor. Next slide, please. This will be the view coming down Venice, now Venice Drive, formerly known as Venice Boulevard. Venice Drive, which depicts the 42-foot tall boat storage and water tank facility, which also includes EMS facilities for police and fire. But the existing vegetation is being retained. So in terms of scenic impact from Venice Drive, for a very large building, and it is a large building, I think we are fortunate that we have some natural screening. Next slide, please. This would be looking across the lagoon at the facility I just described and the boat launch to the left. Again, we've actually received public comment on this from the city side that they're looking forward to the elimination of the clutter and chaos that I described earlier. Next slide, please. At the end of the cul-de-sac, Suntex is providing not only a trash enclosure, which of course is necessary to serve the project, but constructing public restrooms for the users of the Cove East Trail. And that is a real public need that I'm pleased that we're able to deliver. Next slide, please. This would be entering into the kind of drop-off area. There will be an option for valet parking. All of it will be paid parking. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, restaurants would be on the second story for the most part, although there'll be a coffee grab and go on the lower level and a beer and burger joint, so to speak. But here cars would drop off and then go be parked by the valet. So again, all of the pedestrian activity and boat launch activity is outside of the pedestrian zone. Next slide, please. Here you can see the promenade. I think we have something like 1,600 feet of promenade around the marina, which we think is a great public benefit. And there'll be renewed bulkheads. Again, great improvement to water quality. Next slide, please. And if you have been to the marina anytime in the last 30 years or so, this is the existing condition, featuring what was formerly, the fresh catch. And many of us enjoyed cocktails and meals there, and it was the place to be, but it has outlived its useful life. And it will be replaced by, the next slide, please. The new fresh catch, if the moniker remains, but that will be food and beverage in that location. And as you can see, it is a profound upgrade. And with that, we'd be happy to turn it over to Julie to handle the technical part of the code amendment. Unless you have any questions for us, we're happy to take them.
Thank you, Lou. Any questions for Mr. Feldman? Do a few here and then we can go to Julie.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't catch it, and I've been struggling with this a little bit in reading the information so far. What's your specific need for the extra height? I think you mentioned it, but could you elaborate a little bit more?
Great question. In order to comply with the city's 5 and 12 roof pitch architecturally for the 4 buildings that are replacing the existing structures, we need an additional 4 feet of height. For the boat barn, in order for that to meet the requirements to store sufficient vessels, we need to store 3 levels of boats. And again, there's a 5 and 12 roof pitch. And in order for us to do that, we have requested that 42 feet of height be permitted in that zone, which is consistent with heights in other recreation areas like ski areas. So we think that is a reasonable ask, and it enables us to provide the boat storage that in the long run, we think is also a terrific AIS complement, because boats will never leave the marina and they won't be trailered to and fro. And, there's some VMT benefit to that as well.
Just one follow-up. This is Harry Swenson, by the way. One follow-up. How many more boats with that 3rd unit are you able to store in your if we did propose this or accept this?
Eric Metz is the Vice President of Development and knows everything about marinas. So I'm going to defer to him if I may.
It's Eric Metz, Vice President of Development for Suntex. So when you look at the stacking of the actual inside, it's going to vary a little bit. And the market trend, which I think folks are seeing in real time out there, boats are getting bigger, right? And they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you look at your ability to have a building, you don't want to have to go through this process, make the investment, then have a structure that's obsolete in a few years, right? Even I was here a couple months ago, I think I saw my first quad boat out on the lake, going quad engines, which is a very large vessel. And those things move that direction to bigger vessels. We'll make sure we accommodate them, right? And as Lou made the point about also for trailering boats, as they get bigger, you don't really want to trailer them as much. You prefer to keep them where they are. It's sort of safer, right? But also that's what most people want to do. They want to have that kind of one area and one location for both as you're enjoying the vessel and then storing the vessel. Makes it easier for the customer. That makes sense. So it's not an exact number because this can depend on really what type of boat you have. But I hope that answers your question.
I'm sorry, did you give me a number or just?
It's going to vary.
You're going to increase it by 20%, 30%, or it's more the fact that you're responding to the trend in much larger boat sizes.
It's a response in the trend for what is a reality, right? And in terms of a total percentage, it varies is the answer, because it depends on that boat and how you build it. So it's hard to. It's probably 15% if you were to put a number to it, but could be more, could be less. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Robert?
Same question on the change on the major arterial. How does the project require that?
If
That might be more Julie too.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do have
You'll
some
cover that?
information about that, so maybe we can go to my slides and then,
Okay, just one other,
absolutely,
Question.
and we'll all be
Um,
available at the.
because there's some discussion of microplastics on another item. Could you talk about, you mentioned that the new docks put in dealt with the microplastic issue in some ways. Could you remind me of that? I'm sorry. I can't
Yes.
remember it. Yes. Thank you.
the new
Robert
docks are HB TRPE, or high density material that has basically been melted and then enclosed in concrete. So there is virtually no opportunity for disintegration, which is what we experienced with the prior materials. Yep.
Did you want to elaborate on that at all, or that? Okay, I think we're gonna definitely talk about microplastics, so I was gonna ask that same question, so thanks, Robert. Any final thoughts for Lou while we have him, or can I just ask one question for the locals? Will the free parking on Venice Drive remain?
Yes, that's the city's ultimate call, but as we understand it, there's no plan to change the free parking on Venice Drive. That's correct.
That's great news. We don't have to valet our car to go walk our dog. I knew my wife would ask me after this meeting, so now we know. Thank you, Lou. Let's go to Julie. We'll hear about the code amendment. So just to be clear, we are not discussing the actual project right now. There's this distinction where we're now going to look at the code amendments, not necessarily the project.
Thank you, Brendan, and I'll give myself a formal introduction. My name is Julie Roll. I'm with TRPA's Permitting and Compliance Department, and I'm going to go over the proposed code amendments, which are affecting Chapter 37 height and Chapter 90 definitions. And all the proposed language is in the staff report packet, but I'll go through everything in just a moment. Next slide, please. We already know now that these amendments were proposed as part of the Tahoe Keys Marina redevelopment. So I just want to give you an idea of the timeline and process for this project. The proposed amendments and project were presented as an informational item to the Regional Planning Committee just this past March. The code amendments are now here with you guys, the APC, for review and recommendation, while the project itself will go next to the governing board for decision, and that doesn't need APC review. So we're expecting that the project, along with the amendments, will be heard by the governing board this summer. Next slide, please. There are two proposed amendments to Chapter 37 height. First, we have Code Section 37.5.2a, which currently allows up to an additional 4 feet of height for recreation uses where specific findings can be made, and that's capped at 38 feet. So as you can see in number 3, the amendment would expand that allowance to include marinas where the marina use is less as at least 300 feet landward of the high water line of Lake Tahoe as measured from the entrance to a lagoon. So really, we're just adding a new use to this list of eligible recreation uses in this code section. And rather than allowing additional height for all marinas across the board, the language is specifically tying the eligibility to the marina's distance from Lake Tahoe, which is where the scenic threshold, travel routes, and scenic units are measured from. So in this scenario where there's substantial physical and visual separation from the lake, we would expect that scenic impacts would be minimal. And of course, all potential impacts, required findings, and everything will be analyzed as part of the project application review. Next slide.
Can I ask a quick question on this
Yes,
slide
sir.
right here? So where it says, and maybe you're going to get to this, where it says not to exceed a height of 38 feet, and the project's proposing 42 feet.
Well, okay, so there's 2, and there's going to be a second Chapter 37 amendment. This specific section would apply to the buildings on the north side. Which side is it? I'm bad with my directions. So the commercial buildings, which would not exceed 38 feet. I think the highest is around 36 feet. And then the second amendment I'll go over is up to 42 feet, and that's specific to the boat barn building. So that's not all the buildings.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I had a question here also, Harry Swenson.
Yes.
On it, and you just mentioned it, this is just for the Tahoe Keys, or was it, and that was confusing to me because the other standards that you're utilizing, which is the site and beautification,
Yep.
you said it differently, seems to be applied universally but this would be only for Tahoe Keys? Are we running into a situation where others are going to say, well, that's unfair or, you know, discriminatory to, you know, other marinas around the lake?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I do actually, I think after this slide, I have a slide where I'll get into that. If you don't mind waiting, I'll just go through this last code change and then we'll talk about that a little more. Okay, so now we have section 3752C, which currently allows up to an additional 2 feet of height, not to exceed 42 feet in this case. And this is for recreation buildings. It also includes public service in this case, but for our purposes, recreation buildings that are not visible from Lake Tahoe and they're not visible from or within a scenic highway corridor. So that's an important distinction. These buildings are not visible at all from a scenic vantage point. So in this case, the proposed amendment would increase the additional height from 2 feet to 4 feet while maintaining that 42-foot maximum. So it's a pretty minor adjustment there. Okay, next slide. So to answer your question, the Chapter 37 amendments were written to narrowly apply to marinas that are set back at least 300 feet from Lake Tahoe, including any moorings or water-based structures which are part of the marina use. So a pier, buoys, things like that. Of the 13 recognized marinas around the basin, the Tahoe Keys Marina is the only one that meets this distance requirement. And you can see on the map, the outlined in red is the marina project area. This is just to give you kind of a sense of, you know, what we're looking at here. So the project area outlined in red, the stars show the buildings that are proposed or the approximate location, the buildings proposed for redevelopment. And then the yellow buffer is the 300-foot measurement, which is taken from the high water line at the entrance to the lagoon. And this is an important distinction, the entrance of a lagoon, because a high water line would actually follow the alignment inside the lagoon. So if we measured just straight from the high water line, that wouldn't reflect the distance the marina is actually from the lake. So yes, the purposes of the code amendment is not to apply to any marina that wants to build a tall building. We targeted the language because this marina specifically is so far from the lake, and we feel that the impacts from that scenic vantage point would be minimal.
Okay, now a follow-up.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Harry Swenson again. So you just said that this is the only one that would fit into that category. So why the extra specificity? I mean, because that kind of bothers me as just a general layperson going, okay.
Yeah, we really did our best to try to keep the code language simple, but you're probably wondering, why didn't we just say for Tahoe Keys Marina? And we debated that a lot internally, but we thought that including the rationale in the code language of why would just be a benefit. So
If I can add to that, John Hester for the
thank you.
record. Generally, when we write code or plan policies, we don't write it specific to a development, even if it applies to
But
this
that
one.
was my question. But it was mentioned that it was specific to this. What you're describing it to me now, I think I'm beginning to understand the way, because the way I read it, maybe you were using that as an example in the language. I was wondering about, and that's why it seemed specific to me in the documentation. At least I read it that way. But what you're really saying, this is probably the only place it's going to be applicable.
Yeah, functionally. I mean, in theory, it applies to any marina that can meet that criteria, but functionally, if you look at the marinas around the lake, they all really just have, piers or buoy fields, things like that. So, and the only other one that's like somewhat similar is Ski Run, but that is still close to the lake within that 300-foot buffer.
Let me finish my comment, please. It's kind of like Nevada revised statutes say counties of 250 to 750,000. There's only one, Washoe. 750,000 or more, one. There's Clark, but it's not special legislation because it's a class. So we're saying any marina that fits in this class, even though there's only one. So I hope that helps.
That's what I would expect. That's why I was wondering why.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's what I would expect you to do, John. And I just read it a little differently, and I wanted clarification, which you provided, and it makes sense to me. Thank you.
would you prefer questions be held till you? make
Yeah, I
your
was gonna
presentation,
suggest,
or-
sorry, maybe I set a bad trend here.
However you want. I
Let's
don't
let
mind.
Julie, let's let Julie get through this.
Okay, no worries. I
And
just
then
have a
we'll
few more.
come back to us.
Okay, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is just a photo showing the entrance to the east channel of the Tahoe Keys, just for some perspective. From this view, you can see it's really dominated by the residential condos on one side. We've got vegetation on the Conservancy property on the other side. And from this location, you can't see the marina facilities at all. Next slide, please. And these photos show the view towards the marina from approximately a quarter mile offshore. From this distance, the existing and proposed structures would be barely visible, if at all. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we'll get into the Chapter 90 major arterial. As you can see, the definition is really just lists all the major highways and connector roads around the basin. And Venice Boulevard, I know Lou already spoke to this. Venice Boulevard is listed as major arterial. And the amendment would correct Venice Boulevard to Venice Drive, excluding Venice Drive East. And that's from basically the intersection at Tahoe Keys Boulevard to the cul-de-sac at the marina. Next slide, please. The affected segment of Venice Drive is highlighted in red on the map. The X is just showing where the road ends. And although it does provide access to the marina and the trailhead at Cove East, it really doesn't carry through traffic. It doesn't connect any neighborhoods. It doesn't connect any commercial centers. So functionally, it's a local access road. It's not a major arterial. It's not, carrying 3 lanes of traffic, anything like that. And I know this question was asked already, but this amendment is proposed because Chapter 37 requires specific findings for additional height, including finding 1, which is up on the screen. So that finding requires buildings proposing additional height not extend above a forest canopy or a ridge line. So for the marina redevelopment, yes, some of the views locally are going to change, particularly from the condos across the lagoon, or if you're, driving down Venice Drive, riding your bike. So there will be a change in the views, but the intent of the standard, the scenic standards, is to protect the views from the major travel routes and designated scenic vantage points, because that's where most residents and visitors experience the scenic character of our region. TRPA really prioritizes protecting those major primary view sheds. And that's how we maintain our scenic threshold ratings. And I will point out, as you saw in the applicant's presentation, we do expect there to be a lot of positive impacts on the scenic from this project. And I think, next slide, I think that's all I have. I've got the motions up on the screen, but I'm sure there'll be some questions before we get to that.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay.
I bet there will be. But we got through some of them already. So.
Yes.
Robert, do you want to go now? You ready, or we can go to someone else?
Hi, Robert Ehrlich. The 300 feet from high water line, that's one way of looking at it. I think the fresh catch is about 1,800 feet away from the high water line. So I'm wondering, just to be a little more protective of any loopholes where you might have anything trying to get built closer, could you also maybe add, say, it's 1,500 feet or something from high water line to that language? I think that would help people feel a little more comfortable that something 301 feet, even though this marina right now might be the only one, but the idea is you want something, but it's further away. This, in fact, is quite a bit further away.
That's a really great point, Robert. We did contemplate that when we were, putting together this code language. We ultimately landed on 300 feet because that's pretty consistent with how other scenic impact zones are established in our Chapter 66, our scenic quality chapter. And we did, go around and measure the distance on every marina around the lake to make sure we weren't missing something with the 300 feet. But I mean, I think that's a valid point.
So would there be any problems if you would add that language in addition to 300 feet?
No, I mean, I don't think that would.
Okay.
Affect
This
us.
is John Hester. The APC can certainly include that in their recommendation if that's what you guys want to do.
All right, thanks. The thing you mentioned about the list for chapter 90, that explains how major arterial can go away if Venice Drive is east is no longer arterial. Can you, the idea of public recreation areas? I view that kind of spot as a public recreation area. Everybody who paddles down the river generally takes out there. It's also a main spot for people going into Cove East. So certainly, I don't think it's going to destroy my view shed completely, but how would you be able to make that finding that that's not included as a public recreation area?
Are you asking about just like scenic, about
For
the
scenic,
impacts? Well, I mean,
you're removing the major arterial to make the
yes.
finding easier. I would still kind of view that as, maybe it's not a designated scenic turnout, but it's for locals
Yes.
or others, it seems like it's definitely a area of public recreation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is not a designated scenic recreation area. So, I mean, I think that's the answer, is there's no requirement there, but yeah, I mean, it is a scenic area, but not one that has protected views per TRPA code.
Okay, so the language doesn't require, I'm trying to remember what the language was that talked about maximum height. It's not.
Do you want to just back up to that finding?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. 90.
Are public recreation areas defined in your code? I guess that's the question.
Or are you saying that it wouldn't extend above the forest canopy when present? I guess that would be another way to look at it.
There isn't a forest canopy. I think really we're looking at the ridgeline views in this case, because there's not a lot of vegetation in the Tahoe Keys, or from, it's on the Conservancy property. So if you're looking from that direction.
And if I may, I just want to say, to add to this, I know we appreciate the input, of course. The governing board will be making the project findings. So that's something that we have to iron out for sure. It's not really before APC today. We didn't come forward with that. I think we didn't come forward with an amendment or anything like that to change what is public recreation or that sort of thing, because I think our analysis so far is that that finding doesn't have to be made here. And I think part of it is we have certain designated public recreation areas that Julie was sort of saying for scenic purposes. And, obviously, like we all might consider areas near our house public recreation, things like that, but not all of them are protected or from the designated in the code as where we have to make the findings. So again, I think we take that under consideration, and when we come back before the governing board to approve the project, when the governing board approves the project, we'll have to address that.
Yeah, I think that's a good flag, just to make sure we're covered there.
And a couple just more on the finding of the font. Is it the FONSI? I can't remember if that's the right acronym. In terms of lighting on the buildings, is there going to be no mitigation was required, but I think are there going to be lights on tops of those buildings? That would seem like that could well be put into the design not to have that, but that might be something that you're comfortable that putting tall buildings like where the boat barn is, there's not a building there. So just kind of how would you address lighting there to kind of say there's no impact, or impact with mitigation might be required?
Yeah, good question. There will be, of course, building lights and parking lot lights. That's all still under review, but we do have pretty strict requirements in terms of the types of lights that have to be shielded and directed downwards, how bright they are, things like that. So that will all be required.
Project review.
Yeah, that's all. That will all be required in the permit. Okay.
That's it.
Thanks, Robert. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve DeShare, I believe that the correction on the definition of major arterial for Venice is a correction that needs to be made regardless of how it affects this project, because it's not that definition. Correct?
This is John Hester, correct?
Thank you.
Typically in transportation planning, arterials are called that because they have a certain capacity for carrying traffic.
I understand.
This obviously isn't.
Being a transportation person,
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to have the clarification made that this is a correction that's coming about as it relates to this plan, but not because of this.
Correct.
It just happened as it come by, oh, that's not right. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Hitch, did you have something?
Yeah. So the project's also, just to let everyone know that the city council, not sometimes the city council, the planning commission is going to be considering this project. It's currently in design review with the city on June 11th. Currently, we do have a secret document, initial study mitigating deck circulating. We're taking public comments till June 1. From the city's perspective, we're excited about redevelopment of this site. And the city does support the height amendment itself.
Thanks, John. You don't need any area plan amendments.
We don't need area plan amendments. It's TRPA is doing a separate permitting on their end, and we're simply doing a design review on our end for the redevelopment of just the upland portions. We're not involved with any improvements in the lagoon itself.
Thanks, that's helpful. Appreciate it. Harry, let's go to you, and then online APC members, I'll be coming to you next. Just raise your hand.
Hopefully, this is a simple question. Why was it Venice East ever included as a major arterial? Was there some anticipation that we're going to do something else down there? Or, I mean, it seems like we're fixing a problem, but I want to know why the problem existed originally, if anybody knows.
I know. It goes back to the hubris of the original development.
Sorry, John Hester, that's what I was going to speculate, but I don't think anybody was around. Okay, except for Commissioner Teixeira.
That makes a lot of sense. Are there any other things like that around the lake that will eventually run into?
Probably, but not for today.
Well, John Hester, Commissioner Swenson, we try to fix those as we find them. So you're absolutely right. We will see some more, or Commissioner Ehrlich's right. We'll see some more. We always do.
Thank you, Harry. Let's go to Mr. Young and then Ms. Jacobson after that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for the discussion. I have a lot of respect for the TRPA's efforts to protect the scenic view shed around the lake. And I think that it has over the years helped make the local jurisdictions be serious about it and realize that they can't really just go off anywhere they want to. But I think at this point, I'm extremely comfortable with every single jurisdiction around the basin looking at these decisions in the appropriate way. I don't have any hesitations or questions about any of us being able to make the appropriate choices in these cases. And so I appreciate the review, and I see it as a kind of a simple change. But all I really needed to hear was that the city of South Lake Tahoe was okay with it. That was really the most fundamental thing that I needed to hear. I can't see any reason not to support this. And thank you for the discussion, and we appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Eric. Over to you, Crystal.
Yeah, thank you. Related to the height proposals. I guess I don't really have any questions, but just comments. It seems pretty minimal in terms of, what the proposal is. And I would just note that, there seems to be safeguards in place, right, to protect view sheds. So I don't know that I have any concern with that. And certainly, looking for solutions to get redevelopment, environmentally beneficial redevelopment where we can, I think is important. I know we're not talking about this project specifically, but I've been through there, and even though I'm on the North Shore, I've been into the Keys and know what that marina looks like existing. And so it does look like this is a significant improvement to that site. So I would generally support amendments like this that help us get those kinds of benefits. So I did have, and it was kind of touched on already, but a question about the change for Venice Drive East. Just curious if there was some analysis done on the trip generation. I mean, it's clearly a dead end road, right? But and it doesn't make sense that it's considered an arterial road, but just curious if you've looked at the trip counts there just to, typically speaking, like you said, like Mr. Hester said, those designations are put in place because of the trip counts, right? And so just curious, as you move on to the board, if there's some analysis done there to sort of help tell that story of the why behind eliminating that from that designation. So anyway, just curious about that.
I think that's something we'll have to confer with our transportation experts in-house about as the project moves forward. I didn't do any specific analysis as part of this, just for the code amendments.
Good comment, Crystal. Thank you. Other APC members online wish to comment? Ms. Stoller.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I just wanted to echo Eric and Crystal's supportive comments, and I agree with what they stated. So thank you.
Thanks, Ellery. Okay, final thoughts before we go on to our, public comment and then our motions.
Mr. Chairman, I can respond a little bit more on the traffic. Crystal, we will look at, this is John Hester, we will look at the traffic impact from the proposed project. The actual roadway has the capacity to handle what we want to make sure it has the capacity to handle what goes in and out of there. But we anticipate with the project, and maybe Mr. Feldman or his client can talk about this more if you want them to, but we anticipate they will be working with the city on restriping because part of the project we understand will have parking for the recreation area. So that, and I think John Hitchcock's nodding yes. So it may get restriped, but the point is we want to make sure that the in and out boat traffic and the traffic to the recreation area still can be handled, even though it's not an arterial. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's important. There's a lot of, this time of year when the river's moving, there's a lot of traffic in that area for everyone taking their vessels out right there. So
yeah, if I can, I think that's kind of what I was getting at, is it was probably designated that way for some reason, right? Because of the capacity, or not capacity, because of the traffic. And so maybe as you go on to the board, and not necessarily for the project, even for this, just have a little bit more information about that when you move on to the governing board might help, right? Tell that kind of the why behind the justification behind that change for that designation on that piece of the road.
John Hester,
segment.
Again, good suggestion. We'll do that. I think if we can, maybe even with Mr. Teixeira's help, we'll pull out the plans for when the other part of the wetlands was going to be developed. I suspect that's why the arterial was designated. But anyway, or maybe Mr. Ehrlich knows.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be interesting to know, the Robert Ehrlich, whether that designation predated the acquisition and development of Covista as a restoration and recreation project.
Well, I can explain. We actually have a general plan map from the, I believe, from the 60s showing arterial going through the meadow. From Tahoe Keys over to no, to the Bijou neighborhood.
Wow.
Come to our office.
Well, we will
Glad that
certainly
wasn't
include
built.
that in our information we transmit to the board. Thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, put some history in there.
Yeah.
Steve.
So I believe, so Steve, to share for the right, I believe that the original development here predated the incorporation of the city of South Lake Tahoe, which was incorporated in 1965, and probably predated things like traffic counts. I don't think traffic counts were a thing when the Keys development went in. It just went in.
Probably true. Mr. Young, I see your hand up. Would you like a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add, I know we have very crowded agendas. We don't often have time, but this project will go, the project itself, we won't get to see, but I think all of us really love stories of environmental redevelopment. So if there are environmental redevelopment components of this project that the developer or TRPA would like to show off or highlight in the future, I know for one, as an APC member, I would appreciate hearing what kind of environmental redevelopment benefits we do end up seeing out of work, sometime on an agenda someday. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I think we caught that. Final thoughts? Okay, let's go to public comment on this item. So again, to participate, we have a link on Zoom on TRPA's website. If any member of the public wishes to address the APC on item 4A, first we'll take public comments in the room. Please come to the podium, state your name for the record. Then we will go to Zoom participants. Please either raise your hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone, and you will be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. So we'll go to Mr. Feiger. Welcome.
Thank you. Got it. Good morning, Chair and members at APC. I'm Gavin Feiger, Policy Director at Keep Tahoe Blue. We normally don't like project-driven code changes, but in this case, it makes a lot of sense. We've reviewed it in detail, looked at other marinas, potential precedent applicability outside of just the Keys Marina, and it seems like the way it's written, it's good and solidly directed just at the Keys. It does, not to get into the whole project, but the code amendment is needed for the project is designed, and it's the best opportunity by far for the much needed redevelopment down there. Yeah, we're in favor of the height and renaming Venice changes, and we'll be reviewing all the environmental documents in detail just as you are, and have more comments as this process goes along. So thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Gavin. Any other members in the room? Okay, seeing none, let's go online, Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one hand raised online. Alan Miller, please unmute to make your comment.
Hello, APC members. Just a point of order. I'm out here on the Zoom and I'm not seeing the presentations by anyone. I just get a black screen. So there's no screen sharing going on apparently. I normally don't even comment on height and scenic sorts of things, and that's because aesthetics are pretty much subjective. And in my view, I think this, development that is proposing increased height is kind of out of place next to the flattest plain in the whole basin. It's just going to stick up like an island, and the blind bats at TRPA can't consider anything scenic outside of its designated areas. And so I consider the area scenic. I consider it blighted by the tower that TRPA allowed there for telecommunications, which sticks up like a sore thumb in front of the mountains and everything else. I often go hiking up on Gardner Mountain, and that whole thing is just going to stick up like a sore thumb out of nowhere when they increase the heights. You can see it very clearly from there. You can see it from the shoreline. You have my written comments. Again, I think this is very subjective. I think it's piecemealing. That's not justified. There's no rationale really for why they need this increased height, but we all know what it's about. It's about money. It's always about making more money. And so, you know, I just think it's wrong-headed. You know, it's already been developed to a large degree. They've replaced all the docks and piers. Everything's moving ahead. And, you know, I cited a lot of user conflicts there at Cove East. I use that trail regularly. People go out to the lake. People go to the river. It's hugely impacted during 4th of July and other times. And there's really no management plan for any of that. And what I've seen from the city side, we'll see what TRPA does with its planning expertise, but I'm not too hopeful. I think that there's going to be a lot of potential for parking conflicts with 325 free parking spaces being removed and more boats coming in. You know, they claimed it wouldn't be needed for the height. I mean, the Feldman and his engineer got up and, you know, they said, we don't even know how many extra boats we can accommodate, and it varies, but we know it's about getting another level for stacking boats. And so that's really what it's about. And, you know, again, the height is just out of place, out of character for a hugely scenic area that, of course, TRPA can't recognize as such, probably because Cove East was developed after TRPA's ancient regulations were enacted, and they can't update them except like they are for this Venice Drive designation that was tied to when there was going to be a road through the meadow. So I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but
yeah, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, Mr. Miller. Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
And there are no other hands raised to comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll close public comment, bring it back. I forgot to mention one just small detail that I noticed in your environmental checklist. You probably already saw this, Julie, but item 3G, the groundwater section, there was no check mark. And then in the determination on the last page, on page 89, the first two questions, A and B, were not checked. They're just blank. So just make sure you fill that out before it goes to governing board. Final thoughts before we go to our motions. Let me double check online. I think we're good. We have 2 motions. If anyone would care to make the first motion, I would entertain that.
I would like to make an amendment to the first motion to add the language in the section where they talk about the 300 feet landward of the high water line. Add the language, and the proposed buildings are at least 1,500 feet landward from the high water line.
Okay, we have a proposal.
That would be in motion 1, I think.
Proposal to amend motion 1. Is staff comfortable with that recommendation?
Or is that in motion 2? Let's see. No, I guess I'm not sure if it's in 1 or 2 right now.
I think the first motion is the findings, and we can do that. The second, it would be up to APC. I always say this, like, the APC is advisory to the board. You're making recommendations. You can put that in your motion if you want. We will let the board know that you propose that, but we'll also have to take that under consideration and see if it actually works. Because, you know, like I was saying, we put a lot of thinking goes in behind the scenes at the staff level in our office here. And it can be difficult to make promises or make these amendments on the fly in the meeting. So we'll take a look at that. And if the APC wants to make that, include that recommendation in the motion, that's fine. But again, just we'll have to acknowledge it to the board, but can't guarantee that's what we'll recommend.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Graham. Steve?
So on that question, Steve, to share for the record. So I think in the past, when things like this come up, we don't make it part of the motion. We make a separate discussion item for the staff to carry it forward, which I would be more comfortable with that rather than amending it into the motion.
Yes.
John Hester, may I add to that? Typically you direct us to include that alternative in the staff report, so it gets transmitted, but it doesn't change, just exactly as you said.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. I can't determine what the effect of that motion would be, and it sounds like staff can't either. So that doesn't make any sense for it to be in the motion.
Thanks, Steve. Crystal, do you have a comment on that motion?
I actually was going to say the same thing. I have concern about being that specific, and it seems like maybe the staff can explore that, but I don't know that I'd be comfortable being that specific in a motion without having staff actually do the work to see what that does. We certainly don't want to propose something that doesn't work, right? So anyway.
Right. Thanks, Crystal.
Robert Ehrlich again. Would we then make like a separate motion to recommend including that language? I mean, how would we do that? Or is it just like in our minutes or something? It would just say that. How can we make that specific then?
What we've done in the past is you direct us in the staff report transmitting the code amendments to also include that you discussed and recommended we look into the 1,500 feet and report the results of that examination to the board. Something like that. You just direct us to do it, we'll do it.
And before we go to you, Brad, are you clear on why that was being recommended being added? It's for that context, not just can you throw 1,500 in there, but with the additional, here's why. Okay, as long as people heard what Robert said. Mr. Altman.
I don't think that I'm comfortable directing staff or making a recommendation to change that to 1,500. I don't think we have the background and reasoning, and I'm not, based on my understanding of TRPA code, I don't think it's necessary personally, and I wouldn't vote for it. I'm not sure where procedurally that stands in our abilities, et cetera, to make that kind of determination.
Thank you. Steve?
Following up on Mr. Altman's comments, Steve, to share for the record, I think the best thing to do is have someone else make the motion, and then we can have a discussion after the motions are made and adopted. Otherwise, we're jeopardizing the approval process.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. This is Graham St. Michel. Why don't we just make the two motions that are in the staff report and vote on those? And then you can, Mr. Ehrlich, if you'd like to make a motion, word it the way that you'd like. And then you can, APC members can discuss and you can decide whether you can have a vote on that motion. I think that'd be a good way to proceed. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. Who would like to make the first motion then?
Yes.
I'd like to motion to recommend that the TRPA Governing Board approve the required findings, attachment A, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of proposed amendments to chapter 37 and 90 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances.
Thank you, John.
Eric Young, second.
Was that Mr. Young?
Yes.
Thank you, Eric. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Let's do a roll call vote, Tracy.
Mr. Letton?
Yes.
Mr. Swenson?
Yes.
Ms. Maroulas O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock?
Yes.
Mr. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira?
Yes.
Ms. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Foster?
Yes.
Ms. Saiba?
Yes.
Ms. Ferris?
Yes.
Mr. Ferry?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, we have a second motion. Mr. Hitchcock?
I would like to Make a motion to recommend the governing board adopt ordinance 2026 to be determined, attachment B, amending chapters 37 and 90 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances.
Thank you, John.
Eric Young, second.
Mr. Young with a second. Thank you. We'll go back to you, Tracy, for a roll call vote on the second motion.
Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
I'll abstain on this one.
Mr. Jacobson, sorry, Ms. Jacobson, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Swenson, Mr. Swenson,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
That motion also passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Do we have an alternative another motion?
Mr. Chair.
Robert Ehrlich, I move that recommend that the board consider adding additional language to ensure that buildings that are constructed as part of the ordinance also include the language about the proposed buildings be at least 1,500 feet landward from the high water line. And the reason for that being that would help ensure that any of the increased heights are actually further than the 300 feet from the water. And I don't know if the last part is required as part of that.
I think we have the gist. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think I would recommend if APC members want to ask you clarifying questions, but I think we can convey that. I think if that's the vote in the direction, we can convey that and provide an analysis to the board, following this meeting, like there was this additional motion made and APC made this recommendation, and here's staff's take on that, and just put it to the board.
Thanks, Graham. Hitch.
Record John Hitchcock. And what's the amendment itself is specific to our recreation bill, correct? The additional height. What's I mean,
that was a yes for the record,
yes?
Julie.
Yeah, I'm just looking back. It's
because it's public service, recreation.
Yeah, additional building height for
certain
public service.
recreation uses.
Certain recreation uses, and I'm trying to visualize the zoning map in my head and the actual location, and what's the likelihood of that type of use being permissible and actually being able to be built that close to the shoreline,
Well,
not having a scenic impact.
Yeah, like the recreation center is within probably 1,500 feet of the high water line in South Lake Tahoe. So, I mean, there are certainly buildings that are much closer to the lake than the marina, for instance.
But part of that project, didn't you have to make specific findings showing that there was no significant effect?
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify, I think we got to be careful here, because what I was interpreting Mr. Ehrlich's recommendation is the language that we're adding is marinas where the marina use is at least 300 feet. And my interpretation is that he's saying that we would add the 1,500 feet would be specific to the marina buildings, not just any recreation or down, because I think that would be that at that point we're exceeding the scope of what we're agendized to do here today. So it'd be specific to marinas, and I think, just to clarify, if it's any help, the 300 foot, as Julie said, was selected because we did do an analysis, and there are no other marinas that would qualify, and we can confirm, we can make sure, confirm that double, but that was the reason for that number. And as Julie said, 300 feet is another, that's a typical a reference point in a lot of our scenic code provisions. So I think Mr. Ehrlich is if I can take some liberty to sort of say what I think you're thinking, is that the 1500 is just would be more protective and give you be more conservative. And I guess my response is we think the 300 foot is already conservative enough, like that does it. But I think if you want to add anything to that, that's sort of what you're getting at, and you just would like us to include greater distance for that added level of comfort.
That's true, and that would apply, correct? That would apply only to marinas. I mean, in looking at aerial photos of it, there's some other buildings that maybe it's part of TKPOA or something, but I didn't know if that could be used by the marina that's quite a bit closer than that. So, and I don't know if that could be, I think it's basically the intent to be more protective. And I wasn't seeing, keeping it specific to the marinas. I don't know that maybe the discussion to the board could also talk about what's the downside of including that language.
I think I just procedurally then, if we have a new motion, do we need to ask for a second, Graham, or?
Yeah, I mean, you really could do it both ways. You could do this as a motion, and I'm kind of leaving it to how you all want to do this. You could make a motion and have a vote, or we could staff can just do it. We can take a look. But that way it's a little less, it's a little less formal, and I just don't know that it will be, I can't guarantee that we'll include any specific recommendation to the governing board.
I think I prefer the latter. I don't see necessarily the need for another motion. That seems very restrictive, protective to me already. I can't think of any marina that's even close to being 300 feet away from the high water line, besides the unique nature of the Keys, given that they dredged so far back. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young, I'm not sure if you want to make a comment after Steve.
For the record, so I prefer the direction to staff scenario as opposed, the motion may not succeed, in which case that might say to staff, don't bring this forward to the governing board. So it's better procedure to just say, this is an issue that came up during the APC meeting. Staff will look into it. You'll report your findings and what happened to the governing board. A motion could imperil that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that's what I was trying to say, not so well previously, is that's typically how we've handled it before, as you know.
Let's do it that way, if you're comfortable, Robert.
Yeah, I am comfortable with that. Part of the context for this is, there were questions raised about, is it unusual to kind of look through things to figure out how to make something applicable to one project, and you're changing the code. And I think in this case, the intent is to, be protective of visual resources or whatever. And that's why I would think the 1500 in this case would all, if we're already gearing it specific to a single project, and there are no buildings proposed as part of this project within 1800 feet, I think that's my intent. People looking at it saying, well, I understand 300 feet, something you've used before. The 1500 or whatever would kind of identify an intent to be protective and get these buildings further away if they're going to be that tall. Okay, I am comfortable with just it being a sense of the board rather than a motion.
Okay, let's go with that. And Mr. Young, I'm sorry, your hand is up. Do you have a last thought?
Thank you so much. My thought is I'd like perhaps John and council to remind us all how the staff report to the board works after an APC meeting, because my sense and my memory of it is that it is standard operating procedure for us to have a robust discussion, for things like this concern to be raised and for us to all talk about it. And that is not left behind when it moves to the governing board. I believe that our council and John and staff have done not only a good job over time, but have really incorporated it into what those staff reports have to include is the discussion that the APC had, not just that this is what they recommended. They had a vote and they recommended it. I think they've done a pretty good job of representing our discussions. And so I have never really felt a need for a separate motion, although I do respect the concern and I respect where that's coming from. But John and council, maybe you could throw out a word about how these discussions do get reported to the governing board, and how that's done not only in this case, but as a sort of a standard operating procedure. And if I'm wrong, I'd like to ask that's just how it's done ongoing, but I think that's how it's done. Thank you very much for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I'll address that. That's absolutely right. We definitely, this is the point of these meetings, and we definitely carry those discussions forward. Mr. Ehrlich wasn't here when we did the Homewood, but one of my favorite moments being here at TRPA was that Homewood meeting that we had, and all of that discussion got carried forward to the board. And to your point, Mr. Young, and it's a little uncomfortable sometimes to respond to the interest in making, we want to make an extra motion. We don't have to do that. It's certainly your prerogative if you want to take formal action through motion to do that, but we capture all of these discussions and do put that into the staff report for the board. And it's a good function that APC serves. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is I'm not sure the Homewood was my favorite time at TRPA, but
I have a comment too on that.
But yeah, Paul, who handled it, would too. But more specifically, Eric, what we will do, and I know you've probably seen these, is we will say the APC approved both motions by a vote of whatever, and also discussed the concept of changing or adding the 1,500 feet. And that will be kind of the beginning of our discussion to the board of what the APC said. And then in the background, depending on what it is that we're talking about, we will add some analysis of 1,500 feet would have this effect. So that's typically how we would do it. That gives you more detail, more than you want, probably.
Ms. Carr with the final word, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Jennifer Carr, for the record. For the newer members, just to close the loop, which is exactly what John Hester does at our next meeting after this is heard by the board, he will report back to us as to how that discussion went, how it was incorporated, the study, additional analysis that was done by staff between here and there, and sort of the outcome of that. So we probably may hear some of that later in the report today on things that we've done in the past, but that's been going on for the last, half dozen years or so, as a result of APC desire to hear back as to how things progress through the governing board. So TRPA staff, John in particular, closes the loop with us as well, as to how all that went. So we get feedback in addition. So, but I know there's some new people here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for adding that detail.
Oh, and Robert Ehrlich, and just confirming in this case that if the board wishes to make those changes, you don't have to come back and have us do anything about that also.
That's correct.
Onward. Thank you, Julie. Thank you to the applicant team.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
luck with the governing board. Let us move on to item 4B. I think we have Paul Nielsen with us. This is a consideration and possible recommendation for adoption of proposed amendments to TRPA Code of Ordinances, Chapter 36, regarding stealthing requirements for wireless telecommunications facilities. Information on this item can be found on page 91 of your packets. And I will welcome Mr. Nielsen for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, my name is Paul Nielsen. I'm the Special Projects Manager here at TRPA. This item involves an amendment to the code chapter 36, dealing with design standards. You can find the staff summary here on page 91. I've got about 10 minutes for you on the slide presentation, but I did want to say, since someone uttered the word Homewood, and this APC provided some very valuable input during those discussions, ultimately approved by the board. It's good to see that the gondola is under construction. They broke ground. And so that is just, in my mind, a pretty huge step for the West Shore. They're also discussing additional phases. So we believe that that master plan is underway. So I want to start with a little background, give you some perspective on how we got here and what process was used to sort of come up with this idea. So I'm just going to read a little bit, a couple paragraphs, and we'll get to the slides. But again, some context, some background. In 2023, the Tahoe Science Advisory Council convened a microplastics working group of local and regional experts to review the current research and collaborate on next steps. The work group focused on 4 main areas: microplastic sources, fate and transport, microplastic interaction with ecology and impacts to water quality, of course. And fourth, which is the reason why we are here today, regulatory and other source controls that can reduce microplastics entering Lake Tahoe. The council released its report in the fall of 2024, and the governing board received a presentation on the working group and its findings. The report summarized the state of knowledge related to microplastics in Lake Tahoe, and generally found that plastics and microplastic pollution is an ongoing area of scientific research. Obviously, not just here in Tahoe. You're talking about the Great Garbage Patch and the Pacific Ocean, the Himalaya, Everest Base Camp. And so the report suggested that while full scientific knowledge about the most impactful or comprehensive plastic pollution reductions are not known at this time, any actions to reduce plastic in the Tahoe Basin will have a positive benefit for the environment. That's not hard to understand. In April 2025, the TRPA Local Government Committee heard an update on microplastics and work happening to reduce microplastic pollution in the Tahoe region. During the discussion, the committee identified the use of plastics to meet TRPA requirements as an area for potential action. So consistent with the committee's guidance, staff began reviewing where plastics are used to meet TRPA requirements and assessing the opportunities to reduce plastics in Tahoe. Sure.
Are we moving the slide forward? Did you want to move the slide forward?
Let's see. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Sure. Yeah, so this is just a picture of the report. It's online. There's a good summary. If you want to just read the summary, it's not hard to find. So we began reviewing and assessing opportunities to reduce the use of plastics and prevent plastics from being released into the environment. 2 immediate opportunities were identified as part of that work. One requires a code change, the other does not. So next slide, please. Sure. So 2 opportunities, reduce plastics. One, code amendment, we'll talk about today. One does not. And this is a picture that I took at actually a cell site that is a temporary BMP used to control erosion. You may be more familiar with plastic sediment fences, temporary BMPs that are on site. Anyways, long story short, we're developing standard conditions of approval that are going to require the removal of this material in a more timely manner. There's been circumstances that you've probably seen at construction sites where these things linger far too long. They get degraded by the sunlight. People forget about it. The wind picks them up, blows them around. And so we're going to deal with that at staff level in the immediate short term. Next slide, please. So today we're dealing with a code amendment, design standards, chapter 36, specific to telecommunication facilities and microplastics. So this is a cell tower out on Pioneer Trail near the intersection of Washone. There's a little vicinity map there to the right. And this is an example of a monopine, right? You've got cell towers that are just bare poles with the panels at the top, and some that are adorned or stealthed with branches and plastic needles to help it better blend in so that we can make the required scenic findings. And again, the connection here to the thresholds is scenic quality, for the protection of scenic quality, direct connection to scenic quality thresholds. That's why this monopine in this picture was required to be a monopine, because it's on a scenic corridor. You were talking about scenic earlier. Pioneer Trail is a scenic corridor. So scenic thresholds, and also obviously for the protection of water quality. So let's take the next slide, please. So this is just a picture of the site, same site. I was out there a couple weeks ago. This site had been cleaned up a couple years ago. We've been in contact with the owners and they did a good job cleaning it up. But over time, we've seen debris from the cell tower, accumulate on the ground. And so next slide. So I just want to take some pictures, show you what we're dealing with here. This was just one of the branches that was on the ground. A couple years ago, there was a pretty big pile of these branches. And again, we worked with them to have it cleaned up. Next slide. This is just a little close-up of what we found. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in real life, this is what it looks like. When I was out there, this was laying on the ground like it had just fallen. This piece right here had, had some pine needles on it, like maybe it had spent a winter or two out there. And you can see degraded, a little less volume, a little less color as the UV light affects this material. And then I was able to find this almost completely buried, but it was sticking out. And no idea how long this has been here, but this is what's happening. And the material is sort of devolving from this into this based on UV light, based on wind, just based on exposure. So you can imagine squirrel nests, bird nests, who knows what's ingested it. But clearly that mass, that material has degraded and moved on. So let's talk about this slide. Actually, let's go back, please. Slide 9. So this slide shows various sources of microplastics in the environment. We're focused here on the middle where it talks about macroplastics to microplastics. But you can see in this graphic that at the end of the day, this material does degrade. It does make its way into the water courses. And obviously here in the Tahoe Basin ends up in Lake Tahoe. Next slide, please. So there's a number of components to this amendment. And before I get into those details, I just wanted to mention that, monopines are a tool in our toolbox that we've been using for some time, right? This technology wasn't around originally when these cellular facilities were coming into the basin. And when we first started seeing these monopines, we were, pretty excited about the ability to approve these important facilities and have them blend in the environment, enable us to protect the scenic thresholds. And so over time, we've sort of changed our opinion about that, right? As we've seen how they weathered, they've aged, and they've created this microplastic problem. So next slide, please. So general policy direction. We want to state very clearly that monopines are not our preferred alternative. And these items, these next 6, 7 items that I'll be talking about are things that we've done in the review of these projects over time at TRPA. However, they haven't been written down. And so the idea here is to make the review process for these projects more predictable for the applicants. When they're looking at building a facility, they're looking at what's required for an application, they can know upfront what's expected of staff. To date, we have done this in the form of accepting an application. Sometimes this material is there because we've worked with these folks in the past and they know it's expected, but sometimes it's not. And then we have to write an incomplete letter that creates a delay. And again, we see this as critical infrastructure, right? Not just for public safety, public service, but for the public. We want to get these things through the review process, make the findings, get them on the ground. Next slide, please. So another component to the amendment is requiring alternative design approaches. So the amendment encourages applicants to prioritize alternative designs, while also, remembering that we need to make findings to protect the thresholds. And we want to see these facilities blend into the background or blend into the foreground if there's no alternative sites. And this is not a sort of backdoor prohibition on cellular facilities. We need to be very clear. We understand the importance of these facilities. We just want to make it clear what's expected when we review these applications and what our goals are for reducing microplastics. Now, this site right here, this is BevMo in South Lake Tahoe, Hawaii. You may not have noticed this facility, but it's back there. It's not a monopine. I think it fits well. I think a lot of people don't know it's there. It's below the canopy. And so these are the type of alternative designs that we'll be looking for in these application packages. Next slide. Visual simulations. I think you're all familiar with visual simulations. When we did the Homewood project, we had lots of simulations. And we are stating upfront in the code that we want to see visual simulations. Now, 9 times out of 10 with these applications, folks are already submitting these simulations. This happens to be a project on Shop Street in South Lake Tahoe in the industrial area that we are reviewing right now. They came in with a monopine on the right. We asked for the simulation on the left. We're continuing to evaluate the impacts of this project, but visual simulations is a tool we want to put into the code. Next slide, please. Design materials durability. We hope to collect information about these facilities so we can track over time how they're performing, how they're degrading, and are certain materials performing better than others. And then, of course, post-installation documentation. What does the site look like? Let's take pictures. Let's put that in the database so we can track, again, the visual appearance of this over time. Next slide. Monitoring, maintenance, and corrective action. So we'll be looking, our inspectors already take a look at these sites. We've required corrective action before. We will likely do it again, but we want to get the word out that, this will be part of the standard, is making sure that once approved and constructed, that we don't forget about these sites. This tower right here, you might recognize is Sierra Tahoe. When this tower was built, you couldn't see the bole of the tree or the main stem of the monopine. It was thick. It looked pretty good. Over time, it gets pretty windy up there. A lot of sun up there. And this is what it looks like now. I took this picture this winter, and it looks completely different than it did when it was originally constructed. And so I would suggest that if this monopine was in Lake Tahoe, we would want to see new limbs put up. We would want to, see this maintained so that the scenic benefits are realized over time. Next slide. Regional plan compliance. So I want to wrap up here. And I want to make 3 points before we get back to the commission. And those 3 points are: 1, the proposed amendment supports regional plan policies requiring protection of scenic resources, the improvement of water quality, and implementation of environmental threshold standards. The second point is that the amendment recognizes that stealthing techniques may be necessary in some circumstances to mitigate visual impacts. Again, we're proposing to keep the tool in the toolbox. This is not a prohibition. 3, the amendment also supports broader environmental stewardship objectives by addressing potential sources of debris and ultimately trash. And as the saying goes, in the town where I grew up, pack your trash. So really that's what we're doing here. We're just trying to do the right thing. We understand that this is not a comprehensive plastic ordinance for the Lake Tahoe region, but there is science that is happening. And as that science is conducted and conclusions are drawn, it will, as policy, science policy does, inform TRPA policy. And we'll make determinations in the future about what next steps to take. But we wanted to start with this step, and I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Good presentation. Nice sum up. I'm sure folks have thoughts, so it's our opportunity to weigh in. Then we'll go to public comment. Who would like to start? Mr. Swenson.
Harry Swenson. When I read this, I was kind of concerned because traveling around this basin, I need cell towers. I really do. And there's plenty of places we don't have them. Yeah, we have them a lot in our Incline Village area, 90 some there, maybe 400 down here, but along the corridors around here, we need more. I am fully concerned about the microplastics in our lake. I mean, absolutely astonished. One of the things I do, my wife and I often do, we walk around, and the most microplastics we pick up are cigarette butts. Okay. I find it kind of concerning that we're worried about, there's going to be, right now, there's probably 600 to 800 towers in the Tahoe Basin. I don't know how many of those are covered by the pine, just to make them community acceptable, because people don't want to see them, though they want the advantages of them. So if we fully establish, maybe there's a double that amount. Is this level of microplastics what TRPA is real, or what we should be going after? And I'm not making a choice here. I agree that they're bad. I'm concerned because I read the documentation from Verizon that, yeah, they fall down and these things fall down, but they're PVC. So when I look at that, I say, geez, most of our municipal water lines are PVC around here, at least in our area. So either I'm ingesting it 24/7, or it's really not it's really not a substantial issue, other than, which I do appreciate, them falling apart. They should clean up. They should clean up their areas just for because I saw all the loam there. I mean, that's a fire danger for me. I clean mine up every year. I don't know what kind of standard that they use to clean up their areas, but shouldn't that be sufficient rather than a regulation that increases the cost of them putting more cell towers in here, which I don't want to do. And so that's really my concern right now, because every regulation that we do, or anybody does, adds costs to design and development and activities. And yeah, it's borne by the people that are proposing it, but then it's borne by me because I have to buy to survive my cell capabilities. So I'm a little concerned about your concern of the PVC related plastics, and I'm really concerned about more of the plastics that are coming from cigarette butts, which are nylon and other things that break down really easy and go right into the lake. Because that's why I walk around and clean up. I live in the basin, pick up garbage all the time, because we have a motto up in a group of people up in Incline: every piece of garbage ends up in the lake that's not picked up. And we try to encourage our visitors to deal with that. Those are kind of the big issue of microplastics. This one seems almost de minimis to me. And I am, that's my perspective after reading and understanding.
Yeah, thank you. This is just one step in doing the right thing for the environment. We understand that the volume of this material is less than, the plastic bottles that the city of South Lake Tahoe banned, or the state of California, the action they've taken on plastics. But in regard to the cost, I want to tell you that in my conversations, and I've handled a lot of these projects over the years, the carriers have said, and their consultants that represent them, if we don't have to do a monopine, we don't want to, because that does include a lot of extra cost. And so what we hope that this amendment will do will drive the point home that we want to see alternatives to monopines, and that we will find alternatives, maybe pushing these towers back into the forest. John Hitchcock, the city, and I approved a tower that they originally proposed to be a monopine, and we said it doesn't need to be a monopine. On Black Bart Avenue on Pioneer Trail, a lot of people don't know it's there. It's backed by the emergency retention basins. So we are looking for alternatives to those monopines, and I believe this amendment will help them in the long term save money.
Thanks, Paul. I see a couple hands online, so let's go there and then we'll come back to the room. So Ms. Cyber, let's go to you.
Yeah, hi there. Ashley Cyber from the Forest Service for the record. This proposal, this recommendation, I just wanted to put out in the room a couple of consequences that I see possibly happening from this. Like you mentioned, these monopines are expensive. And the Forest Service tends to be the place where a lot of these poles end up getting put. Not as many of the smaller 5G type poles, but the bigger poles tend to get put, in areas that are kind of out of the way. We have standards in our forest plan related to visuals and the acceptable level of, visual change in a particular area based upon, is it, close to a rural area? Is it close to an urban area, or is it more close to the wilderness? And we have, acceptable levels of change that are proposed. I was happy to see that we still kept the monopole option, in as available a tool in the toolbox, because I can see situations where folks are coming to us looking for new towers, something that's up along a ridge line, other scenarios like that where we're really looking at, a trade-off between the scenic and the concern over the microplastics. And in some areas, I think it is still going to be very appropriate to use a monopole, or hopefully, maybe, through these types of things throughout the country, they'll get a little better technology to keep things intact. But I would also mirror that this effort is anything we can do to reduce microplastics is a valiant effort, but I do see this one having some other unintended consequences, and it's going to be, I think, very difficult given this change to actually force, in certain situations, the monopole as an option. When we had kind of before, it really just wasn't an option, or like we were basically telling folks, you need to do some type of visual screening. And it seems that this, maybe just kind of takes that away. I'm sure that's not necessarily the intent, but I think that maybe is one of the outcomes that I could see from this. So I would definitely not be in favor of this if we removed the monopole piece, or, the screening piece altogether, but those options still remain in there. I do see that maybe this is going to have some unintended consequences. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Let's go to Mr. Letton and then Ms. Jacobson, and then we'll come back to the room.
All right. This question's for Paul. So nice presentation. I saw in your presentation a mention of required cleanup. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more there. So when these cell towers or monopines are positioned on U.S. Forest Service land, which the last speaker touched on a little bit, or city or CTC or what have you, who's responsible for the maintenance and the cleanup of any the faux pine needles that go to the ground? I'm just curious about that piece.
I could chime in for the
Yeah.
Forest Service. For
Yeah.
us, it would be the, the owner of the pole. That would be part of our terms and conditions in their permit related to them cleaning up. I'm not
Okay.
sure for the other agencies, but I would imagine it's probably similar.
Yeah, agreed. I spoke with our compliance team yesterday, and we outreach directly to the owner of that pole. That's been the practice in the past, and we intend for that to be the practice in the future. We have various tools to get compliance, whether it be a correction notice or cease and desist, or other elevated means. We haven't had to do that because we've just had cooperation. Folks appreciate us pointing it out. And, the one on Pioneer Trail was taken care of pretty quickly right before winter set in. And so that was good to see.
Okay, so it sounds like the cell companies or the carriers are responsible for the maintenance and cleanup, but that's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's just a little complicating factor where you have someone who it's not the landowner who's responsible per se, but the carrier don't know, to what extent they have personnel available within the basin to be responsive to those types of issues. So it's great to hear that it seems to be going well. Although you were able to collect a lot of samples, specimens there under different age of decomposition from UV. So I don't know what that suggests necessarily in terms of the cleanup and maintenance. Just a clarifying question for me. Obviously, I'm very interested in any topics related to water quality, in this case, microplastics. So that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And I'll just clarify, for probably 3 or 4 years now, we've had permit conditions that requires the applicant, before they construct these facilities, to sign the dotted line that they accept and acknowledge responsibility for keeping these sites clean. So that's been articulated in permits for.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I appreciate the joint inspections we've done between Lahontan and TRPA to look at some of these sites and assess the threat to water quality and come up with some solutions to address this issue. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ben. Crystal.
Yeah, thank you. I have some comments and then a question as well. First, I just want to note that I definitely appreciate the proposal and sort of the effort to kind of strike a balance, with these facilities and coming out, with clear direction kind of on TRPA's policy on this. I also appreciate, writing the code as you have, where it provides, flexibility, it's nimble. And, we all know that technology and science changes and evolves over time. And so I do think it's written in a way that allows us to be nimble as things evolve. And I also just understand sort of the difficulty with, code and conflicts in code, or conflicts in, in this case, thresholds and meeting objectives, right? We want to like meet those scenic objectives, but environmental meeting environmental goals is also super important in terms of in this case the microplastics. So I totally get that there's an effort here to try to strike a balance, and I appreciate that. I also really like the monitoring and sort of the post-installation documentation piece of this. So those are the things I like. I do have some comments or sort of concerns from a local jurisdiction perspective, representing Placer. And so it's more kind of procedural, I would say, and implementation as these types of permits or projects come in. I don't see any inconsistencies between this and Placer's code, mostly because I think this allows for that flexibility, right? But I do see what'll probably happen is that it will sort of bump a lot of these facilities to a kind of higher level hearing process or decision-making process where they would have to go through a discretionary review. And so I think that can present a concern in the sense that we do have studies to show that we have a need for these facilities around at least the North Tahoe area. We've got gaps in service. We know that, Placer knows that. We've done studies to show that. And so we are trying to streamline these types of facilities so that we can get better service. And it really really comes into play with when we're talking about wildfire evacuation, right? So, and just making sure that we have good communication facilities in the event of evacuation, that kind of thing. So, so we have tried to create a process on the local side anyway of trying to streamline where we can, as long as these facilities are meeting certain standards. So that's one concern. The other concern is just the sequencing in terms of the permit process between Placer and TRPA or any other local jurisdiction in TRPA. Because we are mandated, there's a shot clock standards requirements that we have to meet. So the clock is ticking for us to review these projects and get them approved. And so I think there needs to be a process in place to where in this case, we would likely want to send folks to TRPA first before coming to Placer, because that clock starts when we're actually doing that permit. So, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit in terms of TRPA's process for that, but that just kind of poses a concern to me in terms of that again, that streamlining, but then also us making sure that we're not causing a delay in these projects, because if you do and you miss the clock, they automatically are approved, right? So that's a concern. And then on that same note, I just wanted to say the question is, I know you talked a little bit about it, I think is either in the staff report or the presentation about outreach. And so if this does go through, I think there needs to be sort of diligent outreach to this industry to talk about what that procedure looks like between the local jurisdiction and TRPA. So anyway, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about the outreach. That would be great. Thanks.
Good comments. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Let's see, let's take the first one, level of review. So these amendments this proposed amendment does not change the level of review for these types of projects, right? We have staff level review, we have hearings officer review, we have governing board review. That doesn't change. For new facilities, for a new monopole, that requires a hearings officer review. That's in the books today, that requires a public hearing. And that can get bumped to the governing board if needed, but none of that is changing. And we certainly acknowledge the importance of these facilities. So I don't see this complicating things. In fact, what we do, and we actually have a decision matrix that we've developed, when we meet with these folks, we let them know that if they can go to an existing facility, you can avoid a public hearing. And so we get co-location in that case, and they get a quicker permit. So that's happening today. That'll continue to happen. And so I don't see these amendments complicating the level of review or elevating the level of review, because that doesn't change. That's static. Secondly, the permit sequencing. Yeah, that's always a question here in Tahoe. Should me as a project proponent go to the county or to TRPA? And there's different answers depending on the project you're talking about. In these cases, typically we see folks coming to TRPA first because of our scenic threshold considerations. Folks are aware of that. And so we try and abide by the shot clock. But as a regional planning agency, we believe that the shot clock is applicable to the local jurisdictions across the country, but not to the regional planning agency. However, we still try and get these things reviewed and get them to a hearing if needed, so they can go to the local jurisdiction. And so this isn't changing that sequencing at all. And we have good communication with the local jurisdictions. John Hitchcock and I have been in direct communication on the Shop Street cell tower picture I showed you earlier. Placer County, Crystal and the staff up there, we've been in communications with the Dollar Point cell tower. And so that when we make decisions, that they're not in conflict with what the local jurisdiction wants or what TRPA wants, that we know what each jurisdiction is aiming for because we pick up the phone and we talk about it. So I don't see this complicating that. And then as far as outreach goes, we've talked about actually having a little letter writing campaign to the existing facilities. Should this amendment pass, letting them know about the new requirements and seeking their cooperation. I've also been thinking the last few days as I've been reviewing this material and thinking about its implications, that we probably need to develop a special application package for telecommunication facilities. Now that we have design standards, I don't think it would hurt to have a specific application package that we can give to folks that kind of summarizes our expectations, the regulations, processing procedures, things like that. Anyways.
Can I just jump into, this is Graham St. Michelle. I just want to underscore what Paul said. I want to reiterate that because I think in taking that pause here at this moment it is really important. This proposed ordinance would not change the level of review that we're applying to these facilities. As Paul mentioned, like what goes to, the hearings officer or that sort of thing. None of that is being changed. And to Ms. Cyber's comments, I totally want to be very clear and underscore that this is not a prohibition or a mandate on any particular type of design. And you said it in your comment, but I just want to be clear because it's kind of going a little bit of both, is that these monopines, the synthetic tree design, are still within the toolbox that we have. All this ordinance is really doing is saying that if local jurisdictions or if the scenic requirements for this sort of thing dictate or require that we need to have this screened with the faux, the synthetic needles, that we just have some additional cleanup requirements to Mr. Swenson's point about people going and picking up trash. Well, that's part of it is that there's going to be cleanup and some maintenance requirements. We want to know, did they look at alternative locations, visual renderings, that sort of thing. None of this is meant to disrupt or change very substantively the designs or the process for review. It's just some additional requirements or to protect the environment, really, if these facilities are the ones that are built. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham and Paul. That makes sense. Let's come back to the room. Ms. Carr and then Mr. Teixeira.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry, I didn't see your
Right.
microphone.
You're good.
Thank you, Jennifer Carr, for the record. I appreciate that last comment, Graham, because I appreciate that it's not a prohibition. It's a signal to a preference, which would not necessarily be the basis for denial. You'd want to see that they've looked at alternatives. I think it's also good to signal to the industry that that there could be a day someday down the road in the future where there is maybe a plastics prohibition. They've really got to start thinking about this now, as necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. So are there other ways that they could do these out of metal materials as opposed to plastic materials, to try to prepare for the future day where we are all dealing with plastics in general in a different manner. So I feel comfortable there. And it does appear that despite the position that we've been provided by Verizon in particular, that there could be a procedural conflict that would get them stuck between TRPA and the local government. But I'm not hearing that at all from the analysis today. So thank you for that. The only other item I actually did key in on from the Verizon letter was regarding the inspection reports and the frequency of those. I would just suggest, as another government regulator, to really have staff consider how often you really want that paper, or report, digital, whatever. How often you're really going to look at that report. Do you really want something to come in, what is it, twice a year? Are you really going to look at it twice a year? If you're really not going to look at it twice a year, maybe an annual report is sufficient. I mean, what's your inspection frequency? I would advise just that you consider how you're going to use that information and on what frequency to really decide when you would want reporting to be done. Just from a workload and workflow standpoint, we're trying to be more efficient.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. If I could respond. So I mentioned we have permit conditions that have been placed on these projects for the last 3 to 4 years. One of the conditions requires, I believe, it's twice a year. It's once before the winter, it's once after the winter. We've had suggestions that these sites should be inspected after every big storm. We don't have the resources to do that. It's not practical, but I will, and I forgot to mention this earlier in my presentation. We are working on sort of an automated internal process with our reporting and accountability team, whereby these reports will be submitted not to me because I won't be here forever. It'll go to sort of our permit database. And then so that's automated, and then that'll get automated on and reported to whoever the person is at that time. And so, the Homewood Master Plan, for example, they have to report every month on how they're meeting the requirements of the Community Access Plan, as maybe some of you remember. And the first couple of those came to my desk, and I'm like, okay, be careful what you ask for. And now they're actually going to the database directly, and people like Keep Homewood Public, who I talked to the other day, are able to access those directly as soon as they come in. And so we're working on that, Jennifer. And so we will and have given that some hard thought. But right now I wanted to answer it's twice a year.
And just to underscore, because I think that's great points, but sometimes it's as Paul was saying, it's the public who really, they see some value in that. And we might not want it necessarily twice a year, but Keep Homewood Public's checking that every month. And we expect this public database where those reports are going is out there to the public, and those folks who live nearby or whatever can be seeing that. And that's part of the value to that particular requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve DeShiro. So I see this as an attempt to balance, because we get governing board gets local jurisdiction. Everybody's getting a lot of input on the concern over plastics in the environment, microplastics in particular. And to not do something, at least at this level, is to basically say to people, we're not listening. And I don't think, as one person here, I don't want to send that message. I think the operative language in the staff report for me is that rather this proposal expresses a policy preference against reliance on plastic screening material where practicable, encourages applicants to consider alternative designs, and establishes additional documentation, monitoring and maintenance, and corrective action requirements where such materials are proposed or used. So I think it's a tough one, but science is evolving. And that leads me to my other concern, that when I look at the letter from the attorneys for Verizon, they're not serving their clients very well, because basically this letter says, we don't believe there's a problem. And that's a problem. So they say that reports should not be required. And they say that, synthetic trees based on an unproven concern over plastic pollution. So maybe that's what the client told the attorneys to write, but I think that's an irresponsible statement. And I'll just be bold enough to say that. And I hope the attorneys are listening, because that's really not something that, at least here in this region, we can accept as a conclusion that anyone would make. Thank you.
Good comment, Steve. Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing when I read that. Mr. Ehrlich.
Thank you. Robert Ehrlich.
How much plastic is on a monopine in terms of weight? Any ballpark estimates of that?
No, sir.
Okay. I'd be interested in that because I've visited a friend off of Highway 4, and there was a lot of debris below a monopine that they had there, and it just seems like a lot could come off. It just might be nice to come with some ideas on that.
It varies. I mean, because some of these are small facilities, like maybe 30 feet tall. Some are, 100 feet tall. So it varies.
Again, thank you for bringing the pieces and noting that some of the pieces are missing from the older ones. I understand PVC is not the most sensitive plastic for decaying into small pieces, but I would think that probably there are small pieces that go onto the highways in a heavy windstorm, get ground up by vehicles and are pretty small and may not be trapped by stream zones or water quality devices, unlike what the consultant was suggesting, that none of it would reach the lake. And just, a lot of times this is deposited kind of far away from the tree itself. I actually had a regular tree break off the top, and it flew 50 feet or more into my deck and car. So these things will move during the big storms. Question on whether the language is saying provide an alternative. Is the incentivizing enough that they would be inclined to provide a serious alternative? Or might they just say, well, here's an alternative. It's going to look really ugly. Here, it doesn't have, how can we steer them towards providing, indicating your preference that the alternative be a serious one, which may actually be cheaper for the companies? Understand.
We've had cases where we've rejected alternative analyses because they were not thorough. They were not comprehensive. We felt that there were missing alternatives. So we, in our review of those, are looking to make sure that we're looking and seeing feasible, practical, not practical alternatives. So we've rejected those in the past, and we'll probably do that again in the future. But as I said before, the providers, in my experience, don't want to build monopines. They're expensive. They're harder to build. They're just more difficult to maintain. So we've seen folks. We're seeing this up in Dollar Hill. They want to prove to us that there's a better alternative other than a monopine because it's cheaper.
Okay. Another comment, just walking around the forest these days, there's lots of areas where trees have been cut and there's snags. And I don't know if there's any option, it'll probably wouldn't screen quite as well, but any idea of just doing a mono snag with like some metal branches for part of it in terms of being an acceptable alternative for, your scenic review, or John, like your type of scenic review?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a good alternative. I mean, like the city has a pretty robust set of ordinances for cellular facilities. And yes, we have preferred locations. We also have preferred design, and self-design monopine is one of them. But the code does not preclude us from looking at other options. For example, our code where we have preferred locations, which are primarily industrial areas, generally we don't require monopines in those locations because generally it's not doesn't have a scenic impact. And then there's also other options that you can build facilities into building facades and structures. I know there's one being proposed at Heavenly Village on the parking structure where it's actually hidden behind the facade. And so there's options to look at. And then your idea of maybe mimicking a tree snag may be appropriate. On the issue of the monopine and the cost, the cost that comes into that is basically the structural engineering you have to do. You have to have a larger pool to accommodate all those branches when you attach them on. And then generally, if you don't have branches, the pole itself doesn't have to be as structurally sound.
And the foundation of these things are significant. We've got an engineer over here because of the wind loading with those limbs. And so the cost is also, as we've heard out at Shop Street, is related to the deep foundation. But getting to Commissioner Ehrlich's comment on snags, we've talked about snags. There's a snag on a golf course down at Pebble Beach that I think looks really good. And there's also, as you may have seen, and I wish I had a picture today, but cantennas. There's a term called cantenna, which is basically a round tube over the top of the pole, these antennas. So you got the thin pole that comes up, and then it's a little wider at the top. It's just a cylinder. It's called a cantenna. And I think that in some locations, we might see those, but yeah, robust alternative analysis is something that we've done in the past and will continue to pursue.
And just thank you. Follow up again on the inspections. Again, after a significant windstorm might be appropriate. I mean, it'd be nice if the developers folks don't get out there. I don't know if TRPA, I know it looks like you went out there after some of that, but I could envision if it's once a year or twice a year, they may tell people to go, hey, clean it up before we inspect. That's not an unusual request, I would think. And so I'm trying to think then, if you just get stuff that comes in saying, oh, didn't see anything, then that might lead to conclusions that are not warranted. So I don't know if there's how to, if TRPA intends to maybe do more inspections after significant windstorms, or I don't know how you could phrase it better, but in terms, I don't know if you can make the twice a year, include something right after a windstorm or something. I don't know if that's feasible.
Yeah, there's an adaptive management part of this ordinance, and that's not to just guide future ordinance changes, but if this amendment passes, then we will get with our inspectors and we'll find out what makes sense in terms of available resources, internal and external. I think we need to start with the existing permit conditions that require inspections twice a year and start documenting what we're finding and what we're not finding, and sort of grow from there. We'll be learning from future science about future policy, but we need to learn from the existing process we have now when it comes to inspections. I think before we change that or deviate, let's see how that's working, and expand or contract based on what we learn.
We can create an adopt a poll program. There we go. Community driven. Harry, hang on one sec. Just want to get to Mr. Altman.
Brad Altman. Thanks, Paul, for your presentation. So just to kind of bring this back to the actual matter at hand here, which is the code amendment, like this is just more tools in your toolbox.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And as far as cleanup and inspections, just like with any other sort of inspection, if a contractor wants to call for an inspection before he's ready and he fails, that's on him. I would always tell him, don't do that. Just like I would never write a letter saying to the county saying this doesn't meet my requirements. I go there, I look at him like, this doesn't meet it, fix it, and then we will call the county. Like that's just, but if you want to do it and waste your own time and money, that's up to you. So if the Verizon or whoever the applicant is wants to do that and fail an inspection, that's on them. That's not your job. And but yeah, there's just more tools in the toolbox, plain and simple.
Exactly. And more predictability for those folks coming in to apply for these projects. Predictability in the process is something we're always working towards. So thank you for that comment.
Thanks, Brad. Harry, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Stoller, online.
I do appreciate you are now considering a design package for those guys. That I'm sure you would have already included, you wanted alternative designs that are reasonable to consider in that instruction to a potential contractor or a person, Verizon or whoever's doing the job. So that seems like that doesn't, isn't substantial enough for a code amendment to me. Also, when I talked before, I was trying to get down this point or open up this point of, okay, microplastics are bad. We've got that. And we have some basic science, because I spent some time going down the rabbit hole after reading the Verizon, their report on this, not only what they were referencing, but other documents. And then I was up all night and I looked at it and I go, what am I doing? No, but I was concerned when going down that rabbit hole. Here we are and I don't know if this is the first or second or 10th microplastic thing we're doing. We're just doing something to do something. That's what I'm reading a little bit into this. Because it says microplastics, therefore it's bad. Well, there aren't good and bad microplastics. There are things that turn into microplastics. It is a science, and they have a list, and this particular plastic that they use doesn't show up yet in the science. It's not even, measurable at this point in time. And with, like I mentioned before, a substantial number of our municipal water systems within PVC pipes, I wonder why they wouldn't show up. But, my point is, are we making this regulation and make it simpler for you, which is fine? Or are we making this regulation because I hear it a lot about because microplastics are bad? The science will come out on that, and I don't want, I don't want to be wrong, but I also don't want to be overly aggressive in areas that the current science says it's really not a big deal. What is a bigger deal, though, also on these poles, and this was going down the rabbit hole, was the fiberglass coverings they have on their antenna. Those ones are highly reflective in our water supply now, and has nothing. We're talking about shielding, and I like it, and it makes sense as an engineer that it's cheaper to build things that don't have wind. I was an aeronautical engineer, and things that blow in the wind is hard. So my point is, or my concern is, that we're making this a regulation more as to do something. And I felt that came across over here when they said, well, they told us it's not necessary, so we should do it. That was my interpretation a little bit. But I also want to make sure that, we're fighting the right enemy of microplastics, not going down a path where 3 years later, we're going to get, lambasted for, oh, you set this up because of this. And that hasn't been a problem. I'd rather work on bigger, well, I think the TRPA should be working on bigger issues, starting with the larger ones. But I just, I'm concerned about the justification based upon the existing things I have in front of me. But I understand the need to qualify. I understand the need to give people that build these things predictability on what they're expected to do in designs, but I would expect that already for our bodies to be giving them some sort of pre-knowledge of what we're looking for. I just, I have this feel that we're just regulating to regulate, and I don't like that particular feeling. So that's my opinion.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, I like, to me, my response to that would be adding this flexibility. We're not necessarily saying you have to choose one path or the other, but it's a site by site. It's a design issue based on the site selection process. And can that pole be moved farther into the forest? Maybe it doesn't need any plastic on it at all. That's a cheaper build. It's not a scenic issue, etc. Gets the tower up faster. So to me, it meets your concern by adding the flexibility and maintaining or increasing the flexibility. That's just my response. I don't know if staff here has a response to Mr. Swenson that you'd like to share. That's fine if not. Grant?
Yeah, I just want to add, I appreciate those comments too. Just for additional context, the governing board several years ago, kind of informal, the same way that we kind of had this discussion here, said, hey, to staff, at a governing board meeting, you guys should really look at your code and find out where in the code, what are the plastic materials that you're permitting. And nobody's saying that these monopines are what's causing all the microplastics in Lake Tahoe. But the board said, hey, look at areas where you are permitting. Paul mentioned the BMP, materials, and we're addressing that separately. We're looking at the part, we've heard comments about you should address from the keys, like the build pier or dock structures that are enclosed, so that we're looking at all the different areas where these sources that TRPA permits and how we can address them. And again, this isn't a ban. This is just a measure. And so we think we're responding also to governing board in at least informal direction on this.
Thank you. Let's go to Ms. Stoller first, Robert. And then we'll come back to the room. Go ahead, Ellery.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate the conversation, and wanted to thank Graham for his comments too, because that's also my recollection, is that as APC members, and then also for me, having kind of heard public comment that was made during the last interim legislative session for Nevada, members of the public were very concerned about microplastics, and specifically made pointed comments about plastics generated from cell phone sites. And so I think that this, coupled with the science and the governing board's direction, I think it's pretty responsive to the public. And I also perceive it as being a balanced and reasonable proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellery. Let's try to wrap our comment, come to some conclusion here, and then we'll go to public comment. But go ahead, Robert.
Just a comment on some of the studies included by the consultant's report for Verizon that was talking about that the scuba divers who were picking up plastic from the nearshore bottom that had settled were finding a lot of PVC. I think I don't know that that's that relevant or useful one. I mean, if stuff's broken into really small sizes, it may say suspended or not be in the nearshore where they're doing the scuba work.
Yep, agreed. Other comments? Well, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing up the BMP, the temporary BMPs. That's been an issue for me for a very long time. We've not allowed those plastic fiber rolls that you've shown on our projects for a long time. And I think temporary BMPs have a place, but they can create an environmental disaster as well. The amount of plastic used in temporary BMPs, I think, probably far outweighs what we're talking about here today. And they're also sited where we know water will be and it will move. So I think focusing on that has great importance, and I commend you for that. And I just wanted to say too, I support these amendments, the flexibility. Definitely need to focus on plastic reduction. And I hope, Jennifer mentioned technology, I think, but my mind was starting to go with, what will these cell towers start looking like in the future as this technology continues to get better? Well, they should get smaller. If you think about your router in your home, it used to be like this big and now it's this big, and everything, I think the technology will go there. We just need to, I don't want to say be patient, but, continue to allow for that technology to come in. Yeah, it'll all just be AI'd somehow, some way. Anyway, I'm supportive. Can we move to public comment here, and then we'll bring it back to us? So let's move to public comment on item 4B. We'll go to the room first, and then we'll go online. For members online, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen now, or dial *9 on your telephone. You will be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member at that time. And we will go to Miss Patton. Hello.
Thank you, Chair, members of APC. Laura Patton, I'm the Natural Resource Director at the League to Save Lake Tahoe, or Keep Tahoe Blue. Just a little background, I do sit on the Tahoe Science Advisory Council Microplastics Working Group, and we've been really extensively involved in reducing plastics, both macro and micro, and have looked specifically into the plastics that are actually coming off of cell phone towers. Specifically, is about 5 years ago, and we brought this issue to TRPA as well. We had hundreds of basically pieces of plastic brought in by our volunteers, really showing us that this was an issue just from all of our cleanups. And so we were really trying to think about how can we think about alternatives. We also employed Desert Research Institute to look specifically at the plastic materials that are coming off of these cell phone towers. I would say that I do disagree with the Verizon report that came out, in that there's a ton of research about PVC biodegrading, particularly when we think about photo degradation in a high alpine environment like Lake Tahoe and soil contamination. And we actually took some soil samples near some of these cell phone tower sites, and also just looking generally at plastics degrading. Generally, I just want to thank staff that, we really support these amendments overall, and we really appreciate just any proactive step to address environmental risks associated with these plastic stealthing materials, as well as additional other BMPs, and understand the macro and micro issues when we're talking about something as big as microplastics. And really, this is just kind of one small step that we think of in really addressing some of these larger issues. But having the flexibility and being able to roll this out, we think is really important. I just want to point out some regulations. Tahoe is an ONRW, or Outstanding Natural Resource Water Body, meaning that we do have the highest level of anti-degradation under the EPA and Clean Water Act, meaning that we really have an additional bar when we think about these larger companies coming in and saying, hey, we can apply, these materials in other areas. We say, well, Tahoe actually, has this additional regulation for anti-degradation, meaning that we do have this higher bar that we have to reach to protect our lake. I will say, on the California State Water Resource Water Board, and I also put these in my comments, there are trash provisions under their MS4 stormwater permit, meaning that each county and municipality around the lake actually has to reduce the amount of trash that are going into any potential water body. So we actually think that this additional requirement actually helps bring these cell phone towers into compliance with some of the existing regulations that we already have. I just say we strongly support the provisions. We'd like additional monitoring around storms as well. We've seen a lot of these materials everywhere, and really just authorize some of the corrective actions when the deterioration occurs. And we just really appreciate the work to really address this, and really all of the work to look at kind of the science to solutions methodology as we think about adaptive management and code changes that we might need to change as the science continues to develop around this microplastics issue. We already know that Tahoe has the third largest, highest concentration of microplastics, looking at freshwater lakes all around the world. And so we really need to do something. I know this is a small change, but it's an important one, and really appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments in the room? I think Sarah's good, so we'll go online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one hand raised online. Robert Berg, please unmute to make your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Berg. I'm actually one of the attorneys, plaintiff's counsel, who brought the lawsuit in federal court against TRPA regarding the Ski Run Boulevard monopine tower. And Mr. Swenson seems to be the biggest skeptic here of these proposed code amendments. And I want to address some of the misconceptions that he has, which I think gives rise to his skepticism. He brings up the point that PVC water pipe doesn't seem to degrade, and he's been drinking from water pipes. And if it was a problem, they wouldn't allow water pipes to be made out of PVC. Well, PVC water pipes are produced in a manufacturing process where it's extruded into thick, the pipe itself is fairly thick, and it's not a process, and they're also buried underground generally. So it's a process that does not subject them to the degradation that you have here. The PVC pine needles on the monopines are, they're very fragile. You've seen from Mr. Nielsen's demonstration that they degrade because of the UV, the exposure to the harsh environment. In Tahoe, got enormous extreme temperature changes, 100 degrees or more over the course of the year. These things become super brittle. Mr. Nielsen should show you, pick up some of that older pine needle material that he has. You can just play around with it. The stuff will fragment in your hands. And you'll see how it breaks down into just tiny, tiny particles very, very quickly. And that happens within the course of a year or less up on the poles themselves. Now, Mr. Ehrlich asked a very interesting question: how much plastic is on a monopine? I calculated in the course of the hearings before the TRPA, there's 120-foot 120-foot tall tower, monopole tower made into a monopine. There's 8,000 pounds of PVC plastic on that tower. So you see, if that stuff's blown off, like on the top of that ski hill that Mr. Nielsen showed that photo of, you got 8,000 pounds blowing off by the wind into God knows where, into a drainage basin. That's going to wind up in the lake eventually. That's one cell tower, 8,000 pounds just illegally dumped into the environment. This ordinance, this code change, will foster alternative types of cell towers or structures, hopefully, because it'll make it disfavored only to be used if there are no real good alternatives. So it's really a very, very positive step. And we applaud TRPA for doing this. And we think it's really a terrific way to go to mitigate this serious problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg, for those comments.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll close public comment. Thank you. Staff want to respond to any comments? How are we feeling? We do have 2 motions to make on the screen there, but we would entertain any final thoughts. I don't see any hands raised online. Is everyone feeling comfortable with the motions? Anyone care to make motion number 1?
I will. So I motion to recommend that the TRPA Governing Board approve the required findings, attachment A, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of amendments to Chapter 36 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Carr on the second. Tracy, we'll go to you for a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Swenson,
Yes.
Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Young. Mr. Young's dropped off. Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Ms. Cyber,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris, Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next one, Mr. Chair. A motion to recommend the TRPA Governing Board approve and adopt ordinance 2026 attachment B, amending the chapter 36 of the TRPA Code of Ordinances to add section 36.15, stealthing for wireless telecommunications facilities.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Carr on the second. Back to you, Tracy.
Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Ms. Seibert,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Swenson,
Yes.
Ms. Marulas O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion also passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, that concludes our item. Thank you, Paul, for your time today. Keep us in the loop. Okay. Yep. All right, let's move on to item 5, reports. We'll go to Mr. Hester for the Executive Director report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hester here. Just as Ms. Carr said, I'm reporting back on what the governing board has done with your recent actions. And the only thing I have to report on that today is that they saw the same presentation you saw on storm sewer infrastructure, storm water infrastructure that you had in March. They had that last month. And that was well received, and we continue to work with local governments on those. Upcoming, you should have received an email from Maria Ambler on the meeting and retreat that are the 27th and 28th of this month. If you haven't, let me know. I'll make sure you get that. And then upcoming on your next meeting in June, we have your own member who's going to give us the U.S. Forest Service trail plan, Ashley. And then I wanted to offer, if you're interested in it, because of the comments that Ms. Carr made, last year, the board directed us to develop a more robust commitment. We call it commitment tracking system. A reporting and accountability department director, Ken Kasman's been working on that. We actually put out an RFP for software, got it, and are tracking things like the Homewood reports Paul talked about. We'll be talking about tracking conditions of projects. Ken's kind of got a good presentation on the concept there, what we track during the inspection process, and then what we track after that. And he's presenting that to the board in this month. We'd be happy to bring it back next month along with the Forest Service trail presentation, if you'd like. Tahoe Douglas area plan from Douglas County is scheduled in the fall, but the exact meeting, I don't know. And then I've been in touch with Zach from South Lake Tahoe, and they're working on the Midtown area plan. I don't know exactly when that will be here. I don't think you have decided yet, John. Yeah. So that's it. That's my report. And if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can add both that other item to the meeting next month.
I think if we're gonna meet next month, then that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Okay, let's go to Graham for the general counsel report.
Thank you. And I don't have a report today. I usually keep you all apprised of litigation updates. We're continuing to track litigation that we have, but I will spare you and in a few months' time give you an update when litigation moves slowly. So let's take a break from that this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. All right, APC members, it's our turn to share any relevant updates, information you'd like to share with the group. You certainly don't have to, but it's your opportunity. We'll start in the room with Mr. Swenson.
I don't have anything.
Thank you. Mr. Ehrlich. Mr. Altman. Thank you, Steve.
Good to go. Thank you.
Jennifer, we're feeling good. Hitch, nothing. Coming online, we're moving fast today. How about Crystal Jacobson?
Yeah, I just have two items. One is that I think most of you probably are aware of the Village at Palisades specific plan project that's been kind of in the works for since 2016 or so. It was approved and then litigated and then kind of went back through the approval process again and litigated and then settled in last summer. That actually went to our board yesterday and was approved. So that was a big, I think, win for the community. It was a reduction in the project intensity, but still maintains a lot of the community benefits that were part of that project. So I just wanted to note that. And then the second thing is that the Fanny Bridge project, which has been completed for a little while here, the county is having a ribbon cutting and community block party, or the community's having it. That's May 17th, with live music and things like that. So just wanted to note that. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. Ms. Stoller?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellery. Ms. Cyber?
Yeah, thank you. We are continuing to work on implementing some of our big projects that we've recently approved. The e-bikes project, implementing of that, there's sort of two parts. There's the e-bikes part, and then there is the projects part, like the new trails and the trailheads, those pieces. The e-bikes piece is live, as far as the dates. We're after April 1st, so the trails that are allowable, that are existing trails, are open for class 1 e-bikes currently. We are still working on getting the maps updated. There's sort of an official Forest Service map. It's called the Motor Vehicle Use map, the MVUM. There's a kind of an official process that we have to go through for that. And so we're working on getting all of those pieces updated, in addition to having a user guide type of a map that is a little more user friendly, because the motor vehicle use maps have a prescribed way that they work, and only certain things can go on the map. They're black and white, that kind of a thing. So we're still working through that process, and send out to the group when we get sort of official things finalized on that. Folks may have seen over the weekend an interest in the LTBMU's Caldor restoration project, specifically related to herbicides. This has become sort of a larger issue, and I just wanted to read something that we're allowed to kind of discuss related to this topic, because the whole topic related to glyphosate and herbicides is of national interest after an article and an NPR podcast came out. And I just wanted to put out a few things into the group, just some clarifications, because I don't think that I've seen a single report yet or news article that has kind of gotten the basics correct. So I'm just going to read something here really quickly. So the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit recently finalized the environmental planning for the Caldor Fire Restoration Project. The project decision allows for the use of herbicide treatment, including glyphosate, to aid in site preparation before tree planting, and to manage competing vegetation after planting when manual treatments are ineffective or expected to be insufficient. So I'll just clarify, that means that the only use proposed in the Caldor Restoration Project was to, when we plant seedlings in areas where the regeneration potential is below 40%, then we would do this additional competition release around the seedlings, a little diameter around the seedlings only, in order to allow the plants to get big enough to get taller than the shrub layer, so that they don't get outcompeted or outshaded. And there are currently no 2026 or 2027 herbicide applications for shrub release or removal to support reforestation planned. but we may consider doing so in future years, consistent with the approved project actions and resource protection measures described in the Caldor Fire Restoration Project Decision Notice. Treatment of non-native invasive plants during project activities continues to be a priority to prevent the spread of invasive weed species. And that's the regular invasive weed protocol that the entire basin has been involved with for the last, I think we're going on 15 years now. To read about how and when herbicides may be used in support of the restoration project, you can find the decision notice and our analysis on the website. So just wanted to also clarify that in that decision, the maximum amount that we had proposed for that activity was, am I done? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. I don't know where the screen went. So you guys have disappeared. I can't see you. One sec here. Okay, so the last clarification I just wanted to say was that EA, it was 2,400 to 3,600 acres maximum that we would be proposed for herbicide use for this shrub release. And I can't see if there's any questions or any hands. And when I'm done here, I might just have to sort of close down my computer to figure out how to close this off here, but just letting you know.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Any quick questions?
Ashley, if you can hear me, is that 24 to 3,600 acres in the basin or over the entire Caldor project?
That's just in the basin. Correct. And so the El Dorado has things proposed on their side, but under none of the circumstances was the entire, Caldor footprint proposed for any type of herbicide use.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate your update, Ashley.
Yep. Welcome.
Thanks. Let's go to Mr. Letton.
No updates here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. I don't have anything either. So thank you all for sharing. We have one more item before we adjourn, and that's our final public interest comment. So this is for members of the public joining the meeting, either in the room, which we don't have any, or online. Now is your opportunity to provide a final comment to the Advisory Planning Commission. Please note we are prohibited from taking action on items not on our agenda. Again, use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dial *9 on your telephone. You'll be unmuted by a TRPA staff member. And we'll go to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay, we'll close public comment. And do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Steve. We stand adjourned 12:21. Everyone have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks.